G'day everyone, Vindicated Jones here and welcome to my next video in my Combat 101 series. Today I'm going to discuss gimbaled and fixed weapons and the pros and cons of each system and which weapon types work best for each system. I have purposely left out turrets as for the moment they are not advisable to use as direct confrontation weapons. Turrets are best utilised as defensive weapons on armed traders for support while they try and get themselves out of trouble. Fixed weapons are pretty easy to understand. They are weapons which are fixed onto your hull and fire in only one direction. Pilots need to aim their ship at their target in order to land shots. Fixed weapons are generally more powerful than gimbaled weapons, around 15 to 25% depending on the type of weapon you are using, and draw slightly more power. Fixed weapons do have a convergence ability, which means they can make very small slight adjustments when aiming at your target. So when your aiming reticule is over a certain point on that target, all of your weapons can focus on that one point. The convergence is very difficult to maintain, especially on smaller targets. With gimbaled weapons you can lock and track targets to a limited degree and keep constant fire on them while gimbaled weapons compensate for your ship's orientation and flight path. And while this is great, there are some drawbacks associated with gimbaled weapons that you really need to keep in mind. Your weapon's aiming dot will have a small wobble due to the tracking software in the weapon. This makes gimbaled a bit less accurate than fixed weapons, especially at longer ranges where the wobble can be exaggerated to a larger degree. Gimbaled weapons are also prone to chaff. If your target deploys chaff, then your gimbaled weapon's lock will become erratic as they wobble all over your screen trying to reacquire their lock. Chaff can be overcome to a degree by deselecting your target and using your gimbaled weapons as fixed. The problem here is if you have a subsystem selected, then you will have to reselect that subsystem once you reacquire the target. But selecting gimbaled or fixed weapons is only part of the process. Selecting a weapon type such as beam, pulse or burst can have varying degrees of impact on your build when it comes to fixed or gimbal, and can ultimately affect your combat performance. This is where things get a little confusing, especially for newer players. There are some very important differences between Sustained DPS and Burst DPS, and it's actually very important to understand them to make more informed decisions when it comes to weapon choices for your combat playstyle. Sustained DPS refers to the ability to deal more damage over a longer period of time, whereas Burst DPS refers to dealing large amounts of damage over a shorter period of time. On the face of it, burst damage seems preferable, but we also have to take in consideration the power distributor, weapon power draw, and thermal load. High-powered weapons with large burst damage like beams, bursts, plasma accelerators, and railguns drain your power distributor faster and generate a lot more heat. You'll have to release the trigger to cool down and allow your power distributor to recharge. This means there will be a period of time when you'll be doing no damage to your target, and this is where Sustained DPS weapons can have an advantage. With lower powered weapons like pulses, cannons and multi-cannons, they'll drain your power distributor much more slowly and generate only a small amount of heat, allowing you to keep fire on a target for much longer. Quite often this will mean Sustained DPS will do more damage over a longer period of time than burst damage, and this is important to know when deciding your loadout. So what does all of this have to do with gimbaled versus fixed weapons? Quite a lot actually. Unless you're a Jedi or Sith Lord, holding fixed weapons on a target for a long period of time can be difficult, especially if the target is a small ship. This means there'll be many times when you'll be on the trigger for a short period of time and then off the trigger while trying to get your reticule back over the target. This gives your capacitor a chance to fill up a little and your heat to dissipate before firing again. Gimbaled weapons can stay on target for a much longer period of time, meaning you're most likely to be constantly firing your weapons. Having burst DPS weapons means your distributor will be drained incredibly fast and you will be generating a lot of heat. This is where Sustained DPS weapons become more effective, as you'll be draining your capacitor at a slower rate and you won't be generating anywhere near as much heat. So this is probably something very important to consider when creating your builds. Burst DPS weapons will tend to suit fixed weapon setups more effectively, while Sustained DPS weapons will suit a gimbaled weapons setup. To get a good idea about damage levels between each of the systems, I would watch two videos Kornelius Briedis has made, sorry if I mispronounced that mate, which are really quite informative and visually show the differences between the systems. I'll put the links in the description below. So is fixed really better? This is really a hard question to answer and really depends upon the person. There seems to be many negatives associated with gimbaled weapons, affected by chaff, weapon wobble, less power, etc. But there are some very good benefits when it comes to using gimbaled weapons. The most obvious benefit is being able to hold fire on target for a longer period of time. But gimbaled weapons also allow you to control the positioning of your ship while still being able to fire at different angles. This can be extremely beneficial in a lot of circumstances. A good example can be seen through using a very simple but effective tactic for when you're behind your enemy. A great way to maintain your position in combat when you're firing at your target from behind is to always point the nose of your ship so it is heading towards the rear of the target around 50 meters or so, and allow your gimbaled weapons to compensate and fire upwards towards the target. Doing this means your ship is always moving behind your target rather than moving towards your target. The result is you are far less likely to overshoot, and your target will have much harder time trying to turn around and face you. You can use this tactic in many other situations, and it gives you much greater freedom to use thrusters to fly in one direction whilst your weapons are firing at an offset angle. So then Jonesy, you prefer gimbaled weapons, is that what you're saying? Not necessarily. There are trade-offs and benefits to both systems, and it really boils down to what works best for you. My advice? Learn to use both. Discover the advantages and disadvantages of both systems and then work out a loadout that best suits your playstyle. Also, use this experience to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each system and use that information to counter your opponent's weapon system's choice. For new players, I would suggest starting off with gimbals and learn how to focus on flying your ship and practicing thruster and flight assist off techniques. Once you have developed those skills, start to experiment with fixed weapons and see how you go. You should try and get as much fixed weapons experience as possible, as this will aid you with weapons such as railguns and plasma accelerators. It will also aid you greatly when your opponent drops chaff and you have to switch to fixed to engage your target. However, the best bit of advice I can give to anyone is don't let anyone discourage you from your choices. There is a common belief that all pro players use fixed, and if you're not using fixed, then you're a noob or not a proper pilot. And this is just completely false. So don't be pushed around by other players who think their way is the only way. Make your own decisions and realise that firing on your target is only one part of combat. A good commander who knows how to pilot his ship defensively and offensively will always make a better combat pilot. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned a little something new. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe, and check out my other videos if you have the time. This is Vindicator Jones signing off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you out there in the big black.